So what we're doing here is making this land better than it was before we got here. So the accountant side of me is on one shoulder, and that is on the other shoulder. But we can try to find a happy medium in between, and that's what we kind of have to do.
Welcome to the 287th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, regional food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. Joe Lawler is an accountant by trade who also farms, so he thinks a lot about something called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is, in short, what one gives up when choosing one alternative over another. And the concept is discussed a lot when people are considering financial planning and risk-taking. Some would say that adopting a regenerative farming practice comes at the cost of maximum production and maximum profits, at least in the short term. But Joe's passion is farming in a way that leaves the land better for future generations. So he's constantly looking for ways to strike a balance between a healthy landscape and a healthy bottom line. During a recent LSP Soil Health Field Day being held on his family's farm near Rochester in southeastern Minnesota, the young farmer showed off a perfect example of that balance being struck. It was in the form of a 40-acre patch of prime pollinator habitat growing between stands of corn and soybeans. This was part of a program Joe enrolled in through the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. Through the initiative, he was given an annual payment for 2 years to grow a mix of plant species that benefit bees and other pollinators. This diverse planting isn't just good for bugs. It's also providing something for the farmer, healthier soil. And that's where the practical side shoulders in for Joe. The 2-year contract expired in 2022, so during the spring of 2023, he'll be able to plant the field to a crop of corn that will be eligible to be certified organic. Joe calls using a program like this a game changer, given that transitioning to organic can come with a lot of overhead expenses. The Lawler farm is full of these kinds of calculations involving profitability and environmental sustainability. Part of the reason is that Joe, along with his father Steve and Uncle Tim, are farming in the Silver Creek watershed, and any runoff from that area impacts drinking water quality in Rochester. Keeping water cycling on their 600 acres and not running downstream is very important to the Lawlers. That's why they utilize methods that build soil health as much as possible, such as no-till, cover cropping, and rotational grazing of beef cattle. The Lawlers have also devoted 30 acres to long-term University of Minnesota research. During the LSP Field Day, U of M researchers provided tours of plots devoted to studying cover crop seeding rates and termination methods, as well as corn silage production and small grains. An extensive nitrate study, which has significant water quality implications, has also been done on the farm. After the field day, I talked to Joe about how programs like the Pollinator Habitat Initiative are helping him establish regenerative farming practices in a financially viable way. The farmer started out describing how that 40 acres of bee-friendly plants hasn't just been good for his soil and long-term management of the farm. It's also just plain fun to hike through. So, Joe, we just had a great field day here where we saw some of the things that you and your family have been working on with some soil health. And one of the things that I think caught a lot of people's interest was a 40-acre field, I believe, that you're doing pollinator habitat in there, but it's got a little bit of a twist. It's not just something that's being set aside for several years in pollinator habitat. You're using it as a transition into organics, and it seems like it's been a really good fit for you. Like I said, transitioning into organic as well as getting livestock back on the land a little bit.
So the program, I wish I would have known about it sooner on one of the previous fields that I had transitioned. But the program is providing habitat for honeybees or beneficial insects, and it's through the NRCS. We didn't know about this. Mike Muzzy, who I work directly with quite often through Olmsted County NRCS, found this program. And what it does, you go on you can do multiple year contracts, 1, 2, or 3 year contracts, and there's a funding per acre to plant. The mix that I have is a little different. We were able to change it because I did not want yellow mustard, which was in the regular mix. I didn't want it in there going into organic. So we changed it up. The mix is a buckwheat, sunflower, red clover, dwarf Essex rape. I added Daikon radish, Phacelia, and multiple clovers. and that's the mix, which is absolutely beautiful and perfect for building soil, sequestering carbon, building some nitrogen with the clovers, and providing just wonderful habitat for bees and wildlife. It is just blooming with bees, and it's just pheasants, deer. It's absolutely beautiful, and it really sets it apart. This mix sets itself apart amongst your mixes for CRP and any of the other programs that take multiple years, especially prairie grass, to establish. We can establish this in 5-6 weeks. It's incredible.
Yeah, you were mentioning you feel like in 6 weeks you can provide as good a pollinator habitat as maybe something that's been set aside for a couple years.
Absolutely, and I really would like to be using this mix in my rotation every 6-7 years, because of what it does bring, for wildlife, and the habitat that I can provide and the soil that I can build. It's absolutely unreal, and I really like to have more people see this firsthand and the life that this can bring with, there's some annuals, but there's also the perennial clover in there, but just having these really quick growing root building plants.
Well, you were mentioning that you, as part of the program, you have to go out and I think do some monitoring. Describe
Yes.
that a little bit, what you have to do and kind of what you've been seeing.
Supposed to go, and I do, go out and monitor and count bees. I have to walk, depending on how large the field is, you have to set up so many transects. And in 10 minutes, you walk and count bees and what species of plants that those bees are on. The NRCS is using that data, obviously, for this program and to see what effect we are having for providing habitat. And they also provide how many hives are out there, quite a few things. And with that, we also take down optional information about other species of bees that we are seeing out there, along with predatory insects and whatnot. It's amazing. So in part of the field day, we had Ryan Miller from U of M talk about there was an aphid study that they had right next to my honeybee habitat. And it didn't go so well for them this year because they didn't have any aphids. Well, it's because they had this mix right next to him with all these predatory insects. So we're probably going to have to relocate that next year. So we're providing great habitat for these aphid-eaten insects.
Oh, that's an excellent indicator. So describe a little bit. So you, I think you'd said you've done this now 2 years. You did your first planting, was it last year?
Last year,
Yeah, so describe that, and it's a 2-year you kind of doing it. You're going to wrap it up this year, and what you're
Yes.
going to be doing with it and all.
So the first year, and I believe with the program, we're supposed to have it seeded by June 15th. So last year, we were coming out of, I think it was conventional corn, and came in. We prepared the soil, which there was cover crops growing at the time, and seeded with our drill on June 12th, I believe, last year. This year, we did it a little differently. Since buckwheat is in the mix, buckwheat is a very proficient seed, so I talked the NRCS into let me take buckwheat out of the mix because we already had plenty from the year before. So we came in and no-tilled with a little different mix without buckwheat. We added Phacelia. I also added a different Balanza clover to the mix. But we no-tilled it this year. No-tilled it, and this is the second year, which would be and I had a 2-year contract. So I really didn't want to do any tillage because that biannual red clover, I did not want to destroy it. This is its year to really produce for me, to help the soil out and to build that little bit of organic, and I shouldn't say a little bit, quite a bit of organic, and it's going to provide me next year. We did have we didn't have any early tillage, with delayed planting like in June, which was last year. When you put that seed in the ground in June, you've usually flushed most of the early annual weeds out. So last year we hardly had any weeds. Early June planting is just, we use that in organic as well for the row crops. So, but this year, since we didn't have that, we came in and we no-tilled. We already had established weeds that we didn't, So we did have to mow, which hurt my feelings quite a bit because the sunflowers that this mix makes are just absolutely beautiful. So we weren't able to have those this year. We had a few, but I tried to mow around as many as I could.
Yeah. Well, so, and as we said, this is kind of part of it's a two things that this is helping you with. Well, three things really, is building that long-term soil health, but also transitioning into organic. And it sounds like what's your future plans for this? I guess both this fall and then next year.
So we're going to graze it this fall, and I did get an okay to do that since the bees are gone. Graze it this fall. Next spring, I'd love to throw the cattle out there again, but we'll see how, we're getting into calving season, so there's a lot going on. But next year, it's either mow it right away, mow it before tillage. If it's not too tall, that clover's really going to take off in the spring, but we're probably going to have to mow with the stalk chopper, come in and do very shallow incorporated tillage with our John Deere Mulchmaster. Probably going to do that late May, and by the end of the first week in June, we'll be putting organic corn in. So this mix is really going to mineralize pretty quickly, I'm assuming, and provide a lot of nutrients for that corn.
Yeah. Well, this is a really, I think, a great way to do that transition into organic, but get some short-term economic benefit out of it. It sounds like.
Absolutely. There's 2 different payouts, I believe, for this. That I still qualify as a beginning farmer, so my pay for this is a little bit more than normal. But yes, you're right. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful program to transition to organic. The thing, we're not trying to garner a profit in these few years. I just want to help pay some of the expenses, because there's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of other things that go into this transition to organic, and just to have this program it's really a game changer in so many ways. I'm in the low. I think the payment for me, I think, is the low 300s. I want to say, it's about $330 an acre. Seed cost, you're talking about, you're close to, high 50s, $60 an acre. And you're seeding 2 years, but the payment, is annual.
Yeah. One of the other things that we looked at was you're doing quite a bit of work with interseeding of cover crops.
Yes.
And you've modified a highboy, and I think you've done like you said, you call it a little bit of a Frankenstein machine. But for the people who might not be familiar, describe what a highboy is, or what this was used for before, and maybe sounds like you were able to you got some advice that maybe certain things wouldn't work, but you were able to get some of this work. So describe what you've done with this piece of equipment, and then how you are, how you're using it to interseed cover crops. And you got a really good take on some corn there.
Yes.
This year. You got right when it was raining, and got a good rye cover crop. I think you planted it something like September 7th or something like that, and here we are October 1, and it looked really good.
Yeah, I was told quite a few things weren't going to work on this. I guess it's the stubborn side of me to prove those wrong.
When you ignore people.
Yeah, right. So I think it was the fall of 2018, I had the idea that, we started off by wanting, first off, to do interseeding our cover crops in standing corn, or actually we were looking at doing corn, before V4, V5, and I actually went out and bought a tie drill thinking I'm going to take rows out and make it work, and it didn't really materialize. And so in the fall I thought, well, heck, I can build one of these highboy interseeders. I've seen a few that were made at the time in 18. There was a gentleman, Charles Martin, out in Pennsylvania that had built one, and a few others, and I thought, well, heck, I could do that. So went on the computer and started doing some Google image searching, and came across a gentleman who he sold Pioneer detasseling machines made by Pioneer. He was out of Canada, and I just pulled the trigger, had one shipped down here, and I guess the project began, and I don't know if it's even ended yet. We just keep modifying the machine. We're to the point now, our bottleneck at one time was, pushing seed out at a high rate, especially winter rye, which is a very dense seed and requires broadcasted rates that are quite high, which, we're at around 120 pounds. So we had some trouble, but I was told no again, and we made it work. We were able to add we have two air seaters, two air fans on our machine that are powered by a Honda engine to power. It's a Valmar air seater with a 60-foot boom, and we're able to run close to 2 pounds a second out of it with the rye, which is quite incredible to throw that much seed out. But so we run about 6.5, 7 miles an hour in our standing corn. We come in early September. I would like to go sooner, but we kind of have to time it with rains, and throw our cereal rye right over the top of our corn. We also use it for our soybeans, which we built. I built some row dividers to go in front of our wheels so that we were able to divide the rows when we drive. But we drive right when the beans are starting to turn yellow to drop smaller seeded crops like winter camelina, throw a little dwarf Essex rape, or we do like putting some annual ryegrass in as well. Try to cut our rye cycle. We don't want to plant it every year, but yeah. So we use it in multiple crops. We also use it in the spring to do frost seeding of clovers. Works really nice for that.
When you do it with the corn, do you have tubes that drop down into the row, or is it just dropping right on there?
There were some studies that were done. One particular was from University of Iowa that they studied the difference between drop tubes versus just broadcast over the top, and there really wasn't any statistical difference in biomass with the two approaches. So I've been throwing around the idea, but I really do not think that there's much of a difference. Tube versus not tube, and unless I'm proven otherwise, we're going to keep throwing it down that way.
How long have you been using this system?
The first year would have been 2019. We were able to use it. We had decent luck, and that's when we started finding ways to modify it. And like I said, it's always a work in progress.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool, and I think that's the big issue in Minnesota with cover cropping is that timing. People have had real mixed results waiting until after harvest, but you can get a jump on it. September can be a time when maybe you're not super busy because you aren't starting to harvest yet. So it sounds like maybe it can work timing-wise to get it in there.
Absolutely. And that's why we went this route, with our climate. We just don't have the time to get that cover crop established if we wait after harvest. So if we can get it in, a month or so or more before harvest, I mean, usually, well, I shouldn't say, I'm really hoping to have at least 10 to 12 inches of growth on my rye before that combine goes by. And it's actually quite a sight. The combine operator the first year was really scratching his head thinking that we had a weed problem, but no, it's green. Take it off, she's green.
Yeah. And then do you plant green in the spring?
Yes, we do plant green. We will come through, we use a no-till drill, we'll come and plant right through it, and we are still working on, this conventional side of spray dates. But usually we will come in and plant and then maybe spray right before the beans are coming through.
Going back a little bit to integrating livestock into this system, because that's one of the ways that you're making cover crops pay in the short term while you're building that soil health is hopefully is grazing. Yes. And maybe taking cover crops off for forage, that kind of thing. But one of the ways you wouldn't be able to do that if this was like many crop farms in the area, fencing was removed. I don't know when, but fencing was removed from this. So that's a big issue because then for people who want to bring livestock back, you don't have fencing. But you've been able to take advantage of a particular program to get fencing on just this year, I think.
Yeah, we took advantage of the water quality certification program through the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. If one decides to get certified through them, there is yearly a $5,000 grant for implementing water quality enhancements. And I was talking to an individual in that department today, and I guess I didn't realize I might have been the first one that I to convince them that cattle on the ground is a water quality issue. Through being the squeaky wheel, which I'm very good at doing, we were able to convince them that this should be part of that yearly grant. And my father and I both applied for this grant to do our quarter section, his half and my half, and we were able to get close to about 75% cost share on it. So for those who who say, hey, we don't have any fields anymore, this is a very good opportunity, first off, to have them come in and to audit and look at your operation and to see how you're doing with your water quality enhancements or whatnot, doing no-till cover crops. And first off, to do that, but secondly, to take advantage of these grants that really can bring your farm to the next level with your soil quality, and bringing cattle back or livestock, whatever it is, back to the ground is huge. It really brings life back to the soil, to have that manure, to have that urine, to have that saliva from the cow eating your covers. It's one of those unseen benefits that really are hard to measure, but it does make a difference.
Yeah, how many acres in total were you able to get fenced through that?
We did a whole quarter section. About 10 acres of it is not fenced, but yeah, ended up being a little over, close to 2.5 miles actually.
So that's a major expense. So to get that, what did you say, 75% cost share on that?
Yes, absolutely, 75% cost share.
Wow. This, I think, can you explain just briefly what this, for people who aren't familiar with that program, what you have to do to kind of hold up your end of the bargain on this water program?
Yeah, to hold up your end of you just need to show them that your practices are enhancing, let's call it, water quality, or helping water quality, be it no-till, cover crops, nutrient management through, using University of Minnesota recommendations, nitrogen, phosphorus, whatnot, timing of your applications. There's a lot of things that go into it. If you do qualify for this, I think you are exempt from certain new legislation, like, let's say, buffer strips or whatnot, that might become a requirement, but you would not have to participate in those or be held to those standards.
Well, it's really good to see you utilizing a program in this area, because we should make it clear to folks, if they're not familiar with this area, you're in Eota, you're near Rochester, which is, so this area is probably feeding into, say, Rochester's drinking water system. It's part of that watershed that would be feeding into. So having something like this it's a really key area to be having it geographically.
Everything that we have, all of our land slopes right towards the Silver Creek Reservoir above Rochester, which all eventually goes right through Rochester and the Zumba River. So we do maintain very large buffer strips amongst all of our fields. And we are not a farm that tiles often. We have a few here and there. Anything that does come out of the, tiles that do come out of the ground go through filter strips. But yes, no, we take what comes off the farm very seriously. So water, we would prefer it all to go into the soil instead of off the, but, and then that's how, with these practices, we're able to accomplish quite a bit of that.
Your profession is you're an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get the sense that when you're looking at some of these practices that you're doing, there's maybe a difference between short-term investment and long-term investment, and that's something you're trying to balance with. It sounds like building soil health can be a real foundation for financially, as well as kind of in a way that makes the farm more resilient in a long term. That you maybe, I get the feeling that you're using some of your accounting skills to think about some of those things.
Yeah, we do quite a bit of spreadsheets on this, but yeah, my goal, and the accountant side of me is, if I'm going to do something, we need to do it efficiently, and, there is an opportunity cost of a lot of things that we may be missing out on. For instance, doing the bee habitat, it's a year that, we're just paying expenses, right? But in the long term, like you said, what we gain from that, more than makes up for it, at least in a lot of my calculations. But there's another part of it which is making more with less. The typical farm model today is farm 6,000 acres and make 5% and you're doing great, or make 10%, you're doing great. That's not the model I want to go down. I want to go down of doing well with a smaller amount. And not only that, there's also another part of it that accounting shouldn't even be a part of it, but what we're doing here is spiritual in a lot of ways, which is something you can't put a number on, Right. So what we're doing here is making this land better than it was before we got here. So the accountant side of me is on one shoulder, and that is on the other shoulder. But we can try to find a happy medium in between, and that's what we kind of have to do.
Part of this field day was we saw the U of M has been doing long-term experiments on, I think, about 30 acres here. And so that must be interesting to see what they're doing and to maybe get ideas, but also maybe try to influence them a little bit on some of the things they should be looking at with soil health.
No, and I'm very thrilled that they are beginning to do some cover crop studies, which, if we're going to be implementing cover crops in the future and farmers are going to start taking this practice up, we need institutions like the U of M and others to start pushing this research. So it's very nice to have them in our backyard, or actually right in our yard, doing this work. We try to do a lot of our own research in the cover crops because a lot of that wasn't there before. But now to have a partner with it, Ryan Miller is doing an excellent job with his grad program. To get some of this information out there, and we're very, very grateful to have that. And any information they can provide and I can provide to them from past experiences, because I know I have a lot of failures, I could probably help them out on a few things. So it's nice to have that relationship.
For more on ways to build soil health profitably, check out the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode number 287 at landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. By the way, it helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you utilize. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.